everyone. Ready for another deep dive?
Absolutely. Always ready to explore some fascinating new research.
Well, today we're talking about something that might make you rethink your next snack.
Uh-oh, what's that?
This idea that what you eat could actually be making you age faster.
Okay, I'm intrigued. Tell me more.
So we're diving into this brand new article from the American Journal of Clinical Nutrition called Is Your Diet Aging You Faster? Scientists reveal the hidden impact of processed foods, published just a few days ago on February 27th, 2025. And what they found is, well, kind of mind-blowing.
I'm all ears.
They followed a huge group of people, over 22,000, and the ones who ate a lot of ultra-processed foods were actually biologically older than their actual age.
Biological age. That's a key distinction, isn't it?
Right. So maybe you can help us break that down a bit. What exactly does biological age mean?
Well, you've got your chronological age, which is just the number of years you've been alive. But your biological age reflects how well your body's actually functioning on a cellular level.
Okay, so it's like how old your body acts, not just how many candles are on your birthday cake.
Exactly. And in this study, they used over 30 different blood biomarkers to assess this, looking at things like metabolism, inflammation, even the length of those protective caps on the ends of our chromosomes called telomeres. So someone could be 50 years old chronologically, but based on these markers, their biological age might be closer to 60.
Wow, that's pretty crazy to think about. So someone who, say, loves their daily bag of chips might actually be speeding up their aging process without even realizing it.
It's certainly a possibility based on this research.
Okay, so before we spiral, let's back up and define some terms here. When we say ultra-processed foods, what exactly are we talking about? Is it just junk food, or is there more to it?
It definitely goes beyond the usual suspects like fast food and candy. Think of it this way. If a food has a bunch of ingredients you wouldn't normally find in your kitchen, things like modified starches, artificial flavors, those long, unpronounceable preservatives, it's probably ultra-processed.
So it's not just the ingredients themselves, but also the way these foods are made.
Exactly. It's about the intense industrial processing they go through. Things like extrusion, molding, hydrogenation processes that just don't happen in a regular kitchen.
So even some of those healthy protein bars or plant-based burgers could actually be considered ultra-processed. Man, food labels can be so confusing sometimes.
It's true. It can be really tricky to navigate.
Okay, so we know ultra-processed foods aren't great for us, but what makes them so detrimental to our health and aging? Is it just the lack of nutrients, or is there something else going on?
Well, the lack of nutrients is definitely a factor, but the researchers believe that the processing itself plays a big role too. Essentially, those intense processes disrupt the natural structure of the food. And when that happens, it makes it easier for our bodies to absorb sugars and fats really quickly.
So it's not just what we're eating, but also how it's been manipulated, changed from its natural state.
Right. And those changes can have a big impact on how our bodies process the food and how it affects our health in the long run.
This is fascinating, but I have to ask, does this mean even blending up a smoothie could be disrupting the natural food matrix and making it less healthy?
That's a great question, and it highlights a really important point. A smoothie made with whole fruits and veggies is very different from one made with, say, processed protein powders or added sugars. It's all about the ingredients and how they're prepared.
Okay, that makes sense. So it's not just about avoiding the obvious junk food, but being mindful of the level of processing in everything we choose, even things that seem healthy.
Absolutely. And it really emphasizes the importance of cooking at home more often, where you have more control over the ingredients and how your food is prepared.
All right, I'm already rethinking my grocery list. But before we get ahead of ourselves, I want to dig a little deeper into exactly how these ultra-processed foods might be messing with our bodies on a cellular level. You mentioned telomeres earlier, those protective caps on our DNA. What's the connection there?
Right. So those telomeres naturally shorten as we age. It's a normal part of the process. But what this study found is that people who ate more ultra-processed foods had significantly shorter telomeres than those who ate less processed foods.
So it's like these foods are actually accelerating the aging process at a DNA level. That's incredible and a little scary, to be honest.
It's definitely thought-provoking.
Yeah.
And it underscores the importance of understanding the long-term impact our food choices can have on our health and well-being.
Okay, so we've talked about how ultra-processed foods might actually be speeding up the aging process.
Right, like literally making our bodies act older than they are.
But I'm curious about the age up with you.
But how?
Yeah, like what's actually going on in our bodies when we eat these foods that's causing this accelerated aging?
Well, one of the key things seems to be the effect on our metabolism.
Okay, metabolism, got it.
Remember we talked about how processing disrupts the natural structure of food?
Uh,
Well, that makes it way easier for our bodies to digest and absorb all the sugars and fats.
oh, so it's like it hits our system faster.
Exactly.
And that's not good.
Not ideal, no.
Okay, why not?
Well, think about that feeling you get after a sugary soda.
Yeah, that burst of energy, and then you crash hard an hour later.
Exactly.
So that's kind of what happens with ultra-processed foods in general.
It's similar, yeah.
So it's like, even if it's not a sugary soda, it still messes with our blood sugar.
Right, it can lead to these rapid spikes in blood sugar and insulin.
And over time, that can't be good, right?
Right, over time, those constant spikes can lead to something called insulin resistance,
Okay, insulin resistance.
which basically means your body becomes less efficient at using insulin to regulate your blood sugar.
So it's not doing its job as well.
Exactly.
And that leads to...
Well, it increases your risk of type 2 diabetes, for one,
Oh, okay, that's a big one.
but it also contributes to inflammation throughout your body.
Inflammation, I've heard that's bad.
Yeah, it's a key driver of a lot of age-related diseases.
So it's like a domino effect.
Kinda, yeah.
Yeah, one thing leads to another, and those seemingly harmless snacks are setting us up for bigger problems later on.
That's a good way to put it.
This makes me think about something you mentioned earlier, the gut microbiome.
Ah, yes, the gut microbiome.
How does that fit into all of this?
It's a crucial piece of the puzzle.
Okay, remind me. What is the gut microbiome exactly?
It's basically this massive ecosystem of trillions of bacteria that live in our digestive tract.
Trillions, wow.
Yeah, and they play a much bigger role in our health than we used to think.
Bigger than just digestion.
Oh, much bigger.
Like what?
They help us digest food, of course,
Okay, that makes sense.
but they also produce certain vitamins. They regulate our immune system. They even influence our mood.
Wow, so we're talking about a whole body system here.
Exactly.
So what happens to this microbiome, all these little guys in our gut, when we eat a lot of ultra-processed food?
Well, remember how those foods tend to be low in fiber?
Yeah.
Fiber is like fuel for the good bacteria in our gut.
Okay, so without fiber, they can't do their jobs as well.
Exactly.
And ultra-processed foods are also full of...
Sugar, artificial sweeteners, emulsifiers, all sorts of stuff that can disrupt the balance of our gut bacteria.
It's like we're feeding the bad guys and starving the good guys.
That's a really good analogy, actually.
And when that balance is thrown off,
It can trigger inflammation throughout the body.
which we know is linked to all kinds of age-related problems.
Right, from heart disease and cancer to even Alzheimer's disease.
Okay, this is getting pretty serious.
It's definitely something to be mindful of.
It sounds like we've been underestimating the impact of processed food for a long time.
Yeah, I think that's a fair assessment.
But the good news is, now we know more.
Right, we're starting to understand the complex ways our diet impacts our health and aging, which means we can make better choices.
That's a good point.
It's about empowerment, not guilt.
So what kind of choices should we be making? I mean, those study authors called for a pretty major overhaul of our dietary guidelines.
They did.
What were they proposing exactly?
Well, they argued that the current guidelines, which often focus on individual nutrients like fat or sugar, are missing something crucial:
What's that?
the level of processing itself.
Ah, right, back to that.
They're saying future guidelines need to include clear warnings about the potential risks of ultra-processed foods.
So it's not just telling people to avoid junk food.
No, it's about helping people understand that even those seemingly healthy options can be problematic if they've gone through a lot of industrial processing.
Like that low-sugar protein bar I thought was so healthy.
Exactly.
The ingredient list was like a chemistry textbook.
It's easy to be fooled by packaging and marketing.
For sure.
That's why it's so important to learn how to read labels and think critically about the food we buy.
Okay, so for our listeners who are hearing all this and thinking, all right, I need to make some changes, where should they start?
Well, I always say start small.
Small changes.
Yeah. Focus on progress, not perfection.
So maybe pick one meal a day to really focus on. Like incorporate more whole, unprocessed foods into that one meal.
That's a great idea.
I've actually been trying to do that with breakfast.
Oh, yeah.
Instead of grabbing that convenient, overly processed cereal, I've been making overnight oats with whole grains, nuts, and fruit.
That's fantastic.
And it's so much more satisfying.
It is, isn't it?
So what other tips do you have?
Well, don't be afraid to get creative in the kitchen.
Cooking doesn't have to be a chore.
Not at all.
There are tons of simple, healthy recipes out there.
Exactly. And the more you cook at home, the more control you have over the ingredients and the level of processing in your food.
Right. And it's not about deprivation.
No, not at all.
It's about rediscovering the joy of real food.
Exactly.
All those amazing flavors that nature has to offer.
It's about nourishing your body with intention and appreciating the connection between what you eat and how you feel.
And when you start to feel the difference, healthy eating becomes less about willpower and more about making choices that align with your goals. So it's really all connected, isn't it?
It really is.
What we eat, how we feel, how our bodies age.
It's all part of the same story.
I think for me, the big takeaway is it's not just about skipping the occasional bag of chips or fast food burger.
Yeah, it's a much bigger picture, right?
Yeah, understanding that ultra-processed foods are a whole pattern of eating, and that pattern can really affect how our bodies age.
Exactly. And that even things we think are healthy, like those protein bars or pre-made smoothies, they can fall into this category too, if they've been heavily processed.
It's sneaky. This whole deep dive has definitely opened my eyes to how many ultra-processed foods I was eating without even realizing it.
It's everywhere.
Yeah.
But once you start to see it, you can start making different choices.
So for our listeners who are ready to make some changes, where is a good place to start?
I always recommend starting small. Don't try to overhaul your entire diet overnight. Just focus on making gradual changes you can actually stick with.
Progress over perfection, right?
Absolutely. So maybe pick one meal a day to focus on first. Like, how can you make that meal less processed?
Makes sense. Breakfast is a good one to start with, I think.
Yeah, it's easy to fall into the trap of grabbing something quick and easy in the morning, but often those quick options are highly processed.
Yeah, like that cereal I was talking about. Instead, I've been trying to make overnight oats, with whole grains, nuts, and fruit.
Perfect example. And it's delicious too, right?
Way more satisfying than that sugary cereal. So besides breakfast, what other advice do you have?
Don't be afraid to get creative in the kitchen. Cooking doesn't have to be complicated or time-consuming.
I think a lot of people get intimidated by cooking.
Right, but there are tons of simple recipes out there. And the more you cook at home, the more control you have over what goes into your food.
And it's fun. It shouldn't feel like a chore.
Exactly. It's about enjoying the process, rediscovering the joy of real food.
I love that. So it's not about deprivation or following strict rules?
Not at all. It's about finding what works for you, making choices that align with your values,
It's about taking control of our health and well-being.
and realizing that food is more than just fuel. It's about nourishing our bodies and feeling good.
This has been such an eye-opening conversation. Thank you so much for joining us and sharing your insights.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
And to all our listeners, we hope you found this deep dive informative and empowering. Remember, small changes can make a big difference. So start where you are, be kind to yourself, and enjoy the journey.
And never underestimate the power of real food to transform your health and well-being.
That's it for today's deep dive. For more information on the study we discussed, you can find a link in the show notes. Until next time, keep on diving deep.